Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman isn't waiting for his turn at the throne to take his country in a radically different direction. The 32-year-old prince is distancing himself from hardline Islam, progressing women's rights, and looking past oil for income. But not since the reign of the country's founder has this much power been in one man's hands.
Here's a man who identifies himself as the leader of this country, even though his father still remains king.
This is the story of a Saudi millennial whose progressive yet autocratic tendencies are sending shockwaves through the entire region. Mohammed bin Salman, also known as MBS, hasn't always been in line for the Saudi throne. For decades, the throne has been passed from elderly brother to a slightly less elderly brother, all sons of the founder of Saudi Arabia. But MBS is set to buck that trend.
His relationship with his father has put him in a position that has allowed him to leapfrog other members of his immediate family because of the trust that his father seemingly has in him.
That close bond was years in the making. Unlike his brothers, the prince was educated in Saudi Arabia.
He was by his father's side through most of his childhood, and so he understands how the royal family works from an insider's playbook.
A few years after graduating from King Saud University, the prince went to work for his father, then the governor of Riyadh. In 2011, his father was named defense minister, but MBS was initially barred from entering the ministry because of rumors that he was disruptive and power-hungry. Gradually, the prince worked his way back into the then-king's good graces, and he was assigned to Ministry of Defense, where he brought in Western consulting firms to streamline bureaucratic inefficiencies. In 2015, his father became king and gave his favorite son unprecedented control over the majority of government. The prince became known as Mr. Everything. Finally, in the summer of 2017, the king named him Crown Prince, the first in line, bypassing his uncle, one of many older and more experienced statesmen.
He would describe himself as the first Saudi leader of this stature raised in the internet age, and someone who grew up playing video games.
Peter Waldman writes about the Middle East and interviewed the prince for Businessweek.
He compares himself to the Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and says, I'm going to take my state in a kind of visionary direction.
In 2016, the prince launched Vision 2030, his plan to transform Saudi Arabia by weaning the nation off of oil and liberalizing society.
He's lifted the prohibition on women driving. He's introduced public entertainment, such as concerts, and he's allowed cinemas to open.
The prince also plans to fulfill what he calls different dreams for a post-carbon future. A major piece of that plan is to sell shares in the state-owned oil company Saudi Aramco, which could create the biggest IPO in history.
The reaction to the Aramco IPO has been one of enthusiasm and I think a bit of shock, depending on where you're looking at it.
For years, the kingdom has relied on petroleum for 90% of the state budget, almost all of its export earnings, and more than half of its gross domestic product.
They brought in huge oil revenues and spent it for their own survival as a royal family in terms of subsidizing lifestyles among Saudis so they wouldn't push back against this very autocratic family.
The collapse of oil prices from $140 a barrel to the 30s in 2016 caused the IMF to declare that the country would be bankrupt by 2020 if it carried on spending as much as it does.
What this 32-year-old prince has said very clearly is we can no longer rely on oil to fund our lifestyles. We have to begin to contribute on a personal level to work, to be entrepreneurial, to find investments, to find businesses like a normal state.
The Crown Prince introduced taxes, slashed handouts, and is trying to make Saudis actually pay for the energy they consume. The prince also heads an anti-corruption commission, and in the fall of 2017, he carried out an unprecedented purge of the Saudi elite, arresting 4 ministers, 11 princes, and countless businessmen. Most were freed after returning what were alleged to be ill-gotten gains.
By taking on his cousins in the royal family, He's sending a signal that he is dead serious about changing the Saudi system. However, it has not applied to himself thus far. And I think his own personal excesses undermine the signal he's trying to send.
While his approach may seem unforgiving, MBS is shaping the Middle East in ways no one could really have ever imagined. And being so young, he's likely to hold power for over a half-century, meaning there will be continuity of government, but without the checks and balances needed to prevent a dictatorship.
Saudi Arabia is a police state from top to bottom, and it will continue to be for the foreseeable future.